We lay there together, her grip firm but comforting, our bodies molded in a way that made my skin tingle. The room was dark, the air thick with quiet tension, but it wasn't just us in the room. From behind our bed, faint noises stirred the silence, breathy sighs, soft giggles, and the occasional rustle of sheets. First I tried to ignore it, but curiosity tugged at me, and I turned slightly, trying to see what was happening. Before I could shift too far, Annabelle's arm tightened around me, pulling me back against her chest. "Don't," she whispered, her lips brushing against my ear. "They're just having fun." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding as I realized exactly what she meant. I didn't know how to respond. Should I pretend I didn't hear? Should I ask? But before I could decide, Annabelle's hand moved, slowly, deliberately, downward. A soft gasp escaped my lips before I could stop it. She didn't hesitate. Her fingers traced over my stomach, sliding lower, touching a place no one ever had before. My breath hitched. "See," she whispered, her lips grazing my cheek. "I told you. I can make you feel good." My body stiffened, my mind torn between confusion and something else, something I wasn't supposed to want. She stroked me gently, teasing, coaxing, waiting for a reaction, and I gave it to her. I melted against her, my legs slightly parting on instinct, my breathing uneven. Behind us, the soft noises from the other girls continued, rhythmic, knowing, shameless. But here, in Annabelle's arms, I was no longer just a listener. I was a part of it. And the scariest part, I didn't want her to stop. A letter arrived at our home. I already knew what was inside, but opening it still felt like a dream come true. I was overjoyed as I read the letter aloud. It told me that I, Zara, and my best friend Ngozi had won the Shell Scholarship. Our outstanding performance at the Shell Brain competition, known as the Battle of the Brilliant Girls, had set us apart from over 300 other applicants. Out of many, 5 girls were chosen, and our hard work had finally paid off. Heritage College, one of the best girls' schools in Lagos, was our next stop. The school prided itself on academic excellence. Every student wore a neat uniform, a crisp white long-sleeved top paired with a fine, neat purple skirt. All our hair was styled naturally in perfect braids. The college boasted amazing buildings and spacious, well-equipped classrooms. Of course, the fees were very high, so only the rich could usually afford it. My parents were traders. They were not wealthy, but they worked hard every day. When I shared the good news, they cried happy tears and prayed for my success. Ngozi, who had lost her father at the age of 9 and was partially sponsored by the local church, also received kind support from her guardians. Her mother, struggling to care for Ngozi and her little brother Prince, was comforted by the church's prayers. It felt like a heavy weight had been lifted from both our families. Before school started, Ngozi and I went shopping at Okrika Market to get new things. We did our best to pick out fresh clothes and school supplies so that we wouldn't look out of place among the rich kids at Heritage College. The market was busy and unpredictable, and even the haggling felt like an adventure. The day of resumption finally arrived. The night before, I could hardly sleep from excitement and nerves. In the morning, my parents prayed for me and offered advice for the journey ahead. Instead of riding in a fancy car, we had to take the old school bus that brought students to Heritage College. The bus was creaky and noisy. It even coughed out smoke like it was trying to put on a comedy show. Ngozi joked, "Well, at least we travel in style, right?" While I wished the ground would swallow me whole. When we reached the college compound, fleets of exotic cars pulled up. Beautiful, well-dressed girls stepped out and walked gracefully toward the dormitories, their drivers carrying their luggage. I felt even more embarrassed sitting on that rickety bus. Soon we were directed to the admissions office for registration. The principal explained the daily routines and important activities at the boarding school in simple, clear words. After an hour of paperwork and explanations, it was time to say goodbye. Ngozi hugged my parents tightly as they left, while I stood in a corner, unsmiling and still feeling humiliated by our bus ride. As the day went on, I couldn't help but wonder what other surprises Heritage College had in store for us. With our hopes high and our past behind us, our story was just beginning, and I knew that many more adventures and ironic twists awaited us around every corner. The dormitory smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings, but the energy inside was anything but welcoming. Ngozi and I struggled to pull our luggage across the tiled floor, squeezing past groups of girls who were already settled in, chatting like old friends. Some whispered as we passed, their eyes scanning us up and down like we were some sort of entertainment. "Look at them," I heard one girl scoff. Where were they when their mates were traveling for summer holidays? I bit my tongue and kept moving. I wasn't about to let some entitled brat ruin my first day. Ngozi and I found our beds, thankfully bunkmates. We quickly unpacked our clothes, carefully placing them in the small space given to us. Around us, some girls were loudly discussing vacations, expensive shopping sprees, and designer school supplies. We didn't belong here, and they wanted to make sure we knew it. Still, we ignored them. We had earned our place here. At lunchtime, the dining hall was buzzing. Girls moved around like they owned the place, carrying themselves with a level of confidence that came from knowing privilege was on their side. Ngozi and I took our seats, heads down, focused on our food. Just as I was about to take a bite, a sudden shadow loomed over our table. "Move," a voice commanded. I looked up. A girl, no, a mountain of a girl, stood in front of us. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a smirk that said she was used to being obeyed. Ngozi and I exchanged glances before continuing to eat. The girl narrowed her eyes. "Did you not hear me?" "We heard you," I said flatly. "We're just choosing not to listen." There was a moment of silence. Then, before I could react, she slammed both hands down on our table, making plates rattle and spoons jump. Ngozi yelped, nearly knocking over her tray. I, however, held my ground. That seemed to amuse her. "You must be new here," she sneered. "Let me introduce you to how things work. When I tell you to do something, you do it." I leaned back in my chair, unimpressed. "And if I don't?" She grinned like a predator who had just found its prey. "Then you find out why no one says no to me." Without another word, she walked away, but not before making a slow, deliberate gesture. A promise that this wasn't over. Ngozi sat back down, her face pale. "Zara, what have you done?" "I stood up for myself," I muttered, though a small knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. That night, as I walked back to our dorm, I found out exactly what she meant. She was waiting for me in the hallway. Alone. Before I could turn, she grabbed my arm, her grip like iron. "Welcome to Heritage College," she whispered. "Let's see how long you last." And just like that, my first day of school turned into the beginning of a nightmare. From that night on, life at Heritage College became a carefully orchestrated nightmare. The morning after my first encounter with the bully, whom I soon learned was called Vanessa, I woke up to find my neatly folded uniform missing. A quick glance around the dorm told me everything I needed to know. She sat on her bunk, smirking as she watched me search through my belongings. "Looking for something?" she asked, pretending to inspect her nails. I knew it was pointless to ask for my clothes back. If I did, it would only get worse. Instead, I borrowed an extra uniform from Ngozi, who looked at me with worry but didn't say a word. By lunchtime, the stakes had been raised. Ngozi and I were about to sit down with our trays when Vanessa appeared again, blocking our way. This time, she wasn't alone. 2 other girls stood beside her, arms crossed, their expressions a mirror of her arrogance. "You're in my seat," Vanessa said casually. I glanced at Ngozi, who had already tensed up, gripping her tray like it was a lifeline. The dining hall was filled with students, but no one looked our way. No one would help. They had seen this before. Without waiting for a response, Vanessa reached forward and knocked my tray onto the floor. Rice, stew, and beans splattered across the tiles. The room seemed to freeze for a second, but then, as if nothing had happened, conversations resumed. I clenched my fists. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I knew how this worked. The moment I retaliated, the punishment would escalate. Vanessa thrived on reactions. Ngozi, however, had already started cleaning up the mess. My heart sank. She was giving in. "That's right," Vanessa said, grinning. "Know your place." I stared at her, meeting her gaze the way I had the day before. But this time I didn't win the staring contest. I looked down, forcing myself to breathe. She walked away laughing. The message was clear. She owned this place. By the time a week passed, Vanessa had turned me into her personal servant. "Zara, fetch my water. Zara, iron my uniform. Zara, make my bed." It was endless. And the worst part, no one stopped her. Even the other seniors just turned a blind eye. Some of them found it amusing. Others were simply relieved it wasn't them. Ngozi whispered to me one night, "We should report her." "And then what?" I whispered back. "They'll say we're lying, or worse, they'll ignore us, and she'll make our lives even more miserable." Ngozi sighed, staring at the ceiling. "So we just take it." "For now, yes. But in my heart I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be a victim forever." One evening Vanessa pushed too far. I had just finished scrubbing her white socks, a task that made my stomach churn with anger, when she strolled in, tossed a bucket of dirty clothes at me and said, "Wash these too." I was exhausted, hungry, and completely out of patience. "No." The word left my lips before I could stop it. Vanessa blinked, caught off guard. Then her expression darkened. "What did you just say?" I swallowed. My heart pounded, but I didn't back down. I said no. "Do it yourself." Silence. Then, without warning, she grabbed me by my collar and shoved me against the wall. The room spun for a second as my back hit the concrete. "You must think you're brave," she hissed. "You have no idea what I can do to you." I clenched my jaw, refusing to let her see my fear. She smiled, stepping back. "You'll regret this." And I did. The next morning, my locker had been emptied. My books were gone. My toothbrush, soap, and even my only pair of sandals vanished. I had reached my limit. After 2 weeks at Heritage College, I was already at my breaking point. The bullying had drained me, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I had tried explaining to my teachers and the principal why I had been absent from class so often, but they didn't believe me. As a new student, I had no credibility, no reputation to back my words. The principal gave me a stern warning. If I missed class again without a valid reason, I would face suspension. That evening, I locked myself in the dormitory and cried. Ngozi sat beside me, whispering words of comfort, but nothing seemed to ease the weight on my chest. One of my bunkmates, Amina, who I had grown familiar with, joined in. She shared her own story, how she too had been bullied when she first arrived at Heritage College. Her bully had been just as cruel, just as untouchable. And yet, nothing had ever happened to her. The girl had graduated the previous year without facing a single consequence for her actions. The thought made my stomach twist. Would I have to endure this torment until Vanessa finally left? Could I even last that long? I couldn't take it anymore. As my roommates continued sharing their horror stories, I quietly stood up, my body moving as if weighed down by exhaustion. I walked toward the bathroom, whispering a silent prayer that I wouldn't run into Vanessa on the way. The last thing I needed was another cruel task thrown at me, especially after I had just finished scrubbing her week-old pile of disgusting laundry. Inside the bathroom, I turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face, hoping it would wash away some of my frustration. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and puffy from too much crying. I forced a small smile, but it quickly faded, replaced by another wave of sadness. My chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, a loud sob escaped my lips. That's when I heard it. Toilet flushed behind me. Panic surged through me. I quickly wiped my tears, trying to compose myself, but it was too late. A girl stepped out of the stall. A very beautiful girl. Her skin was smooth and glowing, her uniform pristine, and her braids styled to perfection. She moved with the grace of someone who knew exactly how much power she held in the school. She smiled, her eyes warm yet unreadable, and extended her hand toward me. "I'm Annabelle," she said, her voice smooth and confident. "And you don't have to cry anymore." I hesitated before shaking her hand. She let out a soft chuckle. "I've been watching. I've seen what Vanessa has been doing to you." My stomach clenched. Had she seen everything? "I can help you," she continued, leaning against the sink. "But you have to promise me something first." I frowned. "How are you going to help me?" She tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "Give me 3 hours. That's all I need. 3 hours, and Vanessa won't just be expelled, she'll be arrested." I blinked. Expelled? Arrested? How? Annabelle shrugged. "I have my ways." Sounded too good to be true. But then she added, "In return, I want your friendship." I stared at her. "My friendship?" She nodded. "Be my closest friend, and I promise you, no one in this school will ever lay a finger on you again. You'll have protection, money, influence. Whatever you want." The offer was tempting. Almost too tempting. Part of me hesitated. Was this a genuine offer? Or was I just trading one form of control for another? But then I thought about Vanessa, about the humiliation, the suffering, the way my books had been stolen, my food knocked over, my dignity shattered. This was my chance to be free. I smiled, extending my hand once again. "Deal." Annabelle grinned. "Good choice." And just like that, my life at Heritage College took an unexpected turn. I had no idea if I had just made a friend or a mistake. Annabelle's lips curled into a smirk as she leaned in, pressing a light peck on my cheek before strutting out of the bathroom like she had just signed an executive order. I stood there, still processing the entire encounter. Had I just made a deal with my guardian angel or the devil in disguise? Either way, I was intrigued. A few hours later, I was basking in the comfort of my bed, cherishing the fact that it was Saturday, sacred sleep day, when the bell blared through the dorm like an angry mother waking her kids for morning devotion. An emergency bell. I groaned, dragging myself out of bed, already irritated at whoever had decided to disrupt my peace. The entire school gathered at the assembly ground, buzzing with murmurs and impatient glances. Something big was about to go down. And then, like a scene from a crime documentary, the principal strode in, his face set in a grim expression. He cleared his throat before launching into a passionate speech about the zero tolerance for bullying in Heritage College. I almost rolled my eyes. Oh, now they cared. Where was all this energy when I was running errands like a slave? Before I could complete my mental sarcasm, the real show began. Vanessa, the almighty bully herself, was dragged onto the stage, flanked by 2 policemen. The entire crowd gasped. Me. Almost choked. And then, the grand reveal. A projector lit up the screen, playing a video that made my stomach drop. There it was, clear as daylight. Vanessa stuffing me into a wardrobe like I was a forgotten winter coat. My jaw dropped. Ooh, how? Phones were practically contraband in this school. So who had managed to record this? And more importantly, why was it such high quality? As the clip ended, murmurs turned into cheers, and then full-blown celebration. It became painfully clear that I wasn't the only victim of Vanessa's reign of terror. The students rejoiced as the principal, with all the authority of a final judgment, declared that Vanessa was officially expelled and would be handed over to the police for further questioning. The crowd erupted. Claps, cheers, even a few dramatic "good riddance" comments. It was a full-on victory parade. And me. I just stood there, stunned, overwhelmed. A part of me wanted to join in, scream in victory, throw confetti into the air. But instead, I just scanned the crowd, searching for the one person who had promised me this moment. And there she was, Annabelle, standing at the far corner, watching me. Not the principal, not Vanessa, just me. A slow, satisfied smile played on her lips as if she had single-handedly orchestrated this downfall. The moment our eyes met, my chest tightened with an unfamiliar sensation. Admiration. Gratitude. Or was it something else entirely? Blushed. What was this woman doing to me? Weeks turned into months, and Annabelle did not just make good on her promises. She exceeded them. If I thought I was invisible before, I was royalty now. No one dared to speak against me, let alone touch me. The moment Vanessa disappeared, my social status skyrocketed. Annabelle didn't just protect me, she owned me. She moved me into her room, offering me the now vacant bed where Vanessa once ruled. I hesitated. I don't think I can just switch rooms like that. What if I get caught? She laughed, tilting her head at me like I had just said something adorably stupid. Zara, she cooed. Do you really think anyone would question you if I say it's fine? And the scary part, she was right. In Heritage College, Annabelle wasn't just a student. She was the system, and I was now a part of it. The dormitory was quiet, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel amplified. I had just finished folding my uniform when I heard soft, deliberate footsteps approaching. I looked up, and there she was, Annabelle. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me like she had been waiting for the right moment. "Come with me," she whispered, her voice smooth and commanding. Something about the way she said it made my heart race. I didn't ask where we were going. I simply followed. She led me down the dimly lit hallway, past the rows of sleeping students, until we reached the bathroom. The air inside was warm, thick with steam and the faint scent of lavender soap. The sound of water dripping echoed softly. She turned to face me, a slow smile tugging at her lips. "Bathe with me." My breath hitched. Bathe with her. I hesitated, feeling my skin grow hot. She chuckled, stepping closer, her fingers barely brushing against my wrist. "Are you shy?" she teased. I swallowed, shaking my head. "No." She gave me a knowing look before unbuttoning her shirt, letting the fabric slide off her shoulders effortlessly. I felt my stomach tighten. She was breathtaking, her skin glistening under the dim light, her movements slow, deliberate, like she was testing me. She stepped into the water first, letting it run over her body, her eyes never leaving mine. "Are you coming in?" I hesitated for only a second before stepping forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The moment I was beside her, she reached out, her wet fingers trailing along my arm before sliding lower, her touch both gentle and possessive. "You're so tense," she murmured, her voice thick with amusement and something else, something dangerous. Before I could respond, she leaned in, her lips grazing my neck, lingering for a moment before moving lower. Her hands moved deliberately, squeezing my tiny oranges, her touch slow, teasing, making my breath hitch. I felt my legs weaken, my body reacting to her in a way I didn't understand. Her mouth was close to my ear now, her breath sending shivers down my spine. "Has a man ever touched you before?" she whispered. I tensed, barely able to form words. "No." She smirked, her fingers tilting my chin up so I had no choice but to look into her dark, unreadable eyes. "So innocent," she murmured, her lips brushing against my cheek, lingering there before moving toward my mouth. I didn't stop her. I didn't want her to stop. Her hands slid lower, her fingers stroking my butt, pulling me closer, her body pressed against mine. My breathing was uneven, my skin burning where she touched me. I should have been nervous. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. Because in that moment, with her lips so close to mine, her hands knowing exactly where to touch, I wanted more. Just as her fingers dug in deeper. Just as I was losing myself completely. To be continued.